everybody. Welcome to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney, and I am very excited today to bring back an old friend, a young old friend, Ali Mercier. Hi, Ali. Before I introduce you, I just wanted to say hello because it's so good to see you.
Here.
Let me tell you all a little bit about Ali. Ali is a public sector sales executive at UKG, where her work focuses on relationship-driven partnerships and helping organizations navigate growth, change, and complexity. But beyond her role at UKG, Ali is actively engaged, of course she is, in leadership development, yay, through
Can't stop going up.
mentorship, not-for-profit board work, and speaking. She's been a presenter at the National League of Cities on recruiting and retaining talent in the new world of work, and is a gold standard presenter with Sandy Hook Promise. She works in education, violence prevention, and community leadership. Ali is especially passionate about mentoring interns and emerging leaders and believes effective leadership is grounded in people-first systems, honest communication, and trust. She lives in southern New Hampshire with her husband, 2 boys and 2 girls who are her pups. The boys are the human children and the pups are your girls or your pups, right? But the thing you should know that is also really important to me about Ali is that Ali worked for us at the leadership program for almost just shy of 10 years. And the really interesting thing about that, and why I think it's interesting for this particular episode, is that Ali was 23 years old when she started with us. So between the ages of 23 and basically 33, she worked for us. And that is a really interesting time in somebody's career. And if you are out there in that time frame of your career, which is really your growth, you're really growing and falling and growing and trying to figure things out. And we're here in New York, but wherever you are. And then it's also critical because at the end of those years, generally is when you start, gaining leadership somewhere in that process. But also, if you are not in between that age, this still is an important conversation because she's a little bit older now, right? Coming in her early 40s. But if you probably manage or lead or know some people within that really critical time frame of 23 to 33, Ali taught me a lot because she was one of our kind of millennial workers at the time. And believe it or not, now everybody in the workplace, Ali, I laugh because everybody's complaining about the Gen Z worker coming in, and it's mostly
the little ones.
It's mostly you millennials who are complaining. And I always laugh at you and say, "Oh, you don't know how everyone used to complain about you." And now we're used to millennials. Millennials are in power, so it's really fun to see millennials have to stretch now for the Gen Z generation. And I will just say that just like millennials taught some of us Gen Xers and people older than me, the boomers like you, millennials taught us a lot. And I will say to all the millennials out there listening, those Gen Zs are going to teach you guys a lot too, if you're lucky in this process. I thought we would kind of talk about that a little bit, those important early years in someone's career, and something that I thought you were fantastic at, which was this idea of self-advocacy, because I hadn't really known it before you, and you came in a way like a lot of millennials and started to have this new kind of spirit. And it is important to look at because it's a skill. It's a real career builder, and it's super helpful no matter what age you are. And so that's where I kind of wanted to start with anyway for you and kind of take you back, if you will. Why are you so good at self-advocacy? Did you just come out of the womb that way? Did you, what do you think it is?
Yeah. So something just came into my head and I'm like, I need to clock that one, which is we always talk about, obviously, if you can name it, you can tame it. But I think also if you can name it, you can claim it, right? And that's something that was embedded in me from my mom. So when I was like in ninth grade, we went to a larger school, and long story long, or shorter, I'm hoping, all the girls at the end of the semester were given C's and all the boys were given A's. And I participated as an athlete in this gym class. But they had 90 kids. They couldn't do it one by one. I went to my mom and I was like, I got a C and you need to call the school and fix it. And she's like, why do I need to call the school? Their moms are calling and they're fixing it. And she was like, well, what would I do? And I'm like, well, you call my guidance counselor. She's like, are you afraid of your guidance counselor? I'm like, no. She's like, so why don't you go to your guidance counselor and ask? And I was like, rude, fine. She's like, if you have any trouble, I'm here. Like, I'll back you up, but that's something that you should do. And I'll get you if it doesn't work. And in that time, I got my A, right? And that was kind of a early, like young adult almost, even though I was only like 14 years old, kind of empowerment move. And there was just like, we had a saying in my family, like, dead, and just claiming things. And I think what leadership does a wonderful job at doing is creating a safe space. So when I went in, I knew it wasn't going to lose me a job if I said, I want to do this, I want to do this, I volunteer for this, because y'all could just say no, but keep on doing on. But it was just inherent and natural, especially walking into the community that was so special. Is so special.
Yeah. And even though it felt natural to you, I will say on our side of things,
Very
back then, it didn't. We were like, why? Calm down there, Missy. We'll get to you. You just got here. You're trying to jump in everywhere. Wrong. Okay. From my perspective, now I would love for those people, right? Those people that are jumping in saying, I'll do it. Can I be a part of this? Just wanting to be there. At the time, though, it was unusual because so much of everybody's was like, oh, if I'm just hard worker, if I'm a hard worker, people will notice what I do and they'll invite me in. And that's old school thinking. And one of those things that you taught me, I didn't know, I don't even think people used the term self-advocacy then. I think you guys have made it a term that people talk about now. Like we try to teach kids this from a young age. Your mother certainly was teaching it to you. And I think, that is true. You saw a lot of different parenting of your generation. And so therefore we see a lot more of it, like your voices were valued more and so forth. And so they're more invited to the table at work, or if they're not invited, you're coming in anyway, which I appreciate. And now it's a normal part of the workplace. And I think as your generation is looking for that in young people.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be different for that next generation that's coming into those workplaces, those early 20 kids, that were affected by COVID and everything else that are coming into the workplace. They have a very different sense of that.
Well, and it's funny that you say that, Christine, because that's always been in my back pocket. Even like an early self-advocacy moment that I was thinking about was, I don't know if you remember this, but the first time I asked for a raise and the company leadership was not doing well. It was not a time to ask for a raise. But I was like, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? You will get me a raise when you can get me a raise. And I am doing this for all the women and young girls that will come behind me that feel less confident to do this thing. So, and when I teach about advocating for yourself now to young people, I'm always like, don't do it for you. If you don't feel comfortable doing it for you, don't do it for you. Do it to everybody that follows you. And so that's always been a really empowering superpower. And while I didn't get the raise at that juncture because it didn't make any financial sense whatsoever, and I knew it, the next time it was possible, I got me a raise. So it was heard, which I appreciate, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. And even that, like now, I think that is more common. And I hope so. Like, I hope that, people are advocating for themselves and their salaries and so forth. But does have to also be, like you said, backed up by what is the reality of the situation, right?
Yeah.
The reality of like, what do the financials look like? What do my numbers really look like? And, part of, I think you're right, self-advocacy is doing it and then also stepping back and going, okay, wait a minute here. How do I do this and still have be grounded in the reality of the situation?
Well, and I think I opened that conversation with, now is not the right time to ask for a raise. And I'm going to ask for a raise. Like I acknowledge, I'm like, this is inappropriate, but I'm going to do it anyway. Right. Like,
yeah.
And it's funny going into UKG, which is obviously a little bit different from youth development. I was constantly like, hey, how do you do this? Hey, how do you do this? Hey, how do we do this? Hey, how do you do this? Hey, can we do like a LinkedIn contest? They're like, you're not a people leader or an enablement person. I'm like, yeah, but wouldn't it be fun? Wouldn't it be good for all of us to drive some prospecting activity? And they're like, sure. I call myself a benevolent meddler here. And I think that's what I was back then. I just didn't have a title for it.
So what do you think? So maybe you have a more recent, do you have another example of a story, like a moment when there was some moment in yourself of like, should I advocate for this or should I not? What were the things that you actually do? Like, what's the thought process? Because in some ways you're kind of used to that way of being, but for somebody who might be a little bit maybe more nervous or hesitant about doing it, just step back for a minute and say, what is that? What is the thought process that goes through your mind that gets you kind of ready for that?
Yeah. And I'm like trying to slow my brain down. And it feels like when I figured out the tricks to the shortcuts in math when I was in middle school, and they were like, yeah, but how did you get there? And I'm like, I don't know, man. It just made sense. And they're like, yeah, but like, so it's going to be a little bit challenging for me, but let me try. Um, there's one tip that I was actually going to share later that was given to me by a fellow when I joined UKG, and it was to have an SSP folder, which stands for shameless self promotion. So anytime anyone emails you about something great, that you put that in that folder and kind of stack up. It also come review time is like a quick hack. It's like, don't take my word for it. This is what other people said. It's not just my stuff, but also just saying when you're interested, saying what you want to do, being very intentional and overt. I mean, a very early conversation before UKG was UKG, when it was just Kronos, which was like only like 6 months or so before I joined, or me being a part of Kronos before we became UKG. I asked my boss at the time, like, what do you want to grow and be here? And he was like, I don't know, I'm really happy in this position. And I was like, oh, I want to go into sales. That was like a very intentional thing, that was something that I always, again, if you can name it, you can claim it. And so the second I wanted something, and that's kind of been what is true for me all along, is I want this thing. Hey, advocate, boss, leader, friend that's not my boss, but that can help me. Let's figure out how we get this for ourselves. And let's figure out how this can benefit the community and how this can benefit the culture and how we can make this work, even if it's not traditional. And it's worked in some spaces. And in other spaces, I've had to kind of take a side role that's unofficial, and like the mentoring of the interns, for example, I have countless interns and young people, or excuse me, folks in early careers that I mentor at the company. It's not an official role. I'm not paid for it, but it's also why I live and breathe and get up in the morning. So I'm happy to be doing it anyway.
Yeah, I love that because I do have a lot of folks that we work with, different teams that get put in charge of the interns, right? So, and then they feel like it, especially if they're salespeople. Oh my God, do they feel like it takes away their time from sales? But how do you help people who might be around your age or maybe a little younger that have to work with these younger folks, and how do they support them in these new roles when, let's face it, interns are coming in really shell shocked, nervous. I have kids that are the age of, the intern age, and I can only imagine how they would be in the workplace. Like, I get nervous, like, thinking about that, as their parent. What do you do when you have somebody? How do you help them? How do you focus so that you have time for all of it? What would you say your secret sauce is?
What I find is true for me is that I do the intern work even when I'm not supposed to be working. So when I was out on maternity leave with my second kid, I was having phone calls with my interns constantly, even though I was on leave, because I knew that I wanted to take care of them. So for me specifically, it's a default. For folks that are trying to figure it out, I think Gen Z is so special because they were born with iPhones in their hands. And so when we think about that, what I think about now in the workplace is that we used to have a top-down learning, and that's no longer true. And that's not something that necessarily everybody's embracing. But whenever I'm talking to Gen Z, I'm trying to figure out what they already know that I don't, because they teach me so much their own selves. So I get a lot out of not only advocating for Gen Z, sponsoring Gen Z, but learning from Gen Z, because they are just so adept at this arena that none of us are at that same level, because they were born into it. So it's in their bones in a way that even if you're like, one of my uncles is a guru in technology, even if you've studied it, been decades in it, it's not in your blood in the same way that it is when you're growing up. And that's your life led. That's the way you communicate. That's the way you socialize. That's the way you get in touch with people. That's why you hang out. That's different than I need to learn how to use technology, it's a very different skill set. And so I try to be a sponge with Gen Z as much as I try to support their growth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's interesting when we're talking about the idea of self-advocacy and it being important. So often in the term is the word self, right? So that it can sometimes seem selfish. But in essence, like, that's the point, is that's why you're not going to advocate for yourself. Who is, right? Like you said before, if not me, who? If not now, when?
Emma Watson, stealing her quote. Sorry, Emma.
It makes your value visible, because let's face it, everybody is busy. And what I kind of love about people now who advocate for themselves is it allows me to not have to be the one to see everything, to know that they're going to share those things with me. They're going to share their wins. They're going to share those things, and hopefully I can help spotlight it, but I don't have to always be the one keeping track of all of this for everybody. So I think it's important that it makes your stuff visible, but also what people who are good self advocates like yourself, it's so interesting to me because you also are good advocates for others, right? Which is what makes you successful in your sales role. It's what makes you successful as a leader. It's what makes you successful with the interns. So practicing on yourself is a good way to start, but then it allows you in this leadership role to advocate for the folks that work for you or work with you or your customers and get them what they need.
5,000%. I have two different, and let me rewind or downplay that to 100% because there's no such thing as over 100%, Christine, I remember. But I have two different stories. One is with a client where she's still my client. She's a Black woman that was project manager. And we had a very strong CHRO over her that was very vocal. We had a very strong payroll manager under her who was very vocal and kept forgetting, or a lot of people kept forgetting in the process to check in with this project manager. And I always made sure to be like, okay, let's go. PM, what do you want to do here? Do you agree with what everybody else is saying? Is this what you want for the direction of the project? Yada, yada, yada. And she called me after the project was completed, after the opportunity closed, thanking me because she's like, a lot of people dismiss me and forget that I'm in the room, and you never did that once. And you always made sure my voice was heard, even though I do tend to be quiet. And I'm just very grateful that you in that moment were able to do that. In another situation, I had a peer that I was working with, and we had a sales team she was presenting to, and she was getting interrupted, and the person that was running her deck was being asked the questions. So not even the expert was being asked the questions, but the guy that was running her deck was being asked the questions. And I just stopped the room and I was like, you know what, folks, we need to check ourselves here, because this person introduced themselves as the expert, and A, we're interrupting them constantly, and B, we're directing our question as the person that's moving her deck along, not the person that's the expert in the rooms.
Interesting. I think that is a perfect example of how this self advocacy that you have does come over to advocating for others as well, advocating for maybe folks who at whatever moment it is in time don't feel like their voice is as valued. And also the other thing, it really does, I think, really good advocacy, period, especially self advocacy or advocating for your team or for certain powerful voices in a company can drive growth, can drive opportunity, can actually increase, whether it's productivity, whether it's revenue, whatever it is, because you're wanting to highlight something that's really positive, right? Now, sometimes people can say, whoa, 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 this is a lot. Like, I need a moment to digest this, right? Because you're going to be coming in very confident.
You know me.
Sometimes I used to call my niece strong and wrong, like, you're going to come in strong and wrong. Here she comes. And I think, there is some of that can be like, whoa. But once we can kind of like relax into it, it can actually, like I said, it is a superpower. And if more people did it, it would be, a really powerful place to work.
Well, and it reinforces the psychological safety that's already in place. When you have teams that are able to speak up within an uncomfortable moment, then people are like, oh, it is safe to do that in this space. And so it just reinforces, yes, we do have psychological safety in this arena.
And I do think it's important because it also helps you if you're feeling burnt out or you have a lot of resentment built up about your employer or your boss. There is a moment, I think, to self-reflect and going, well, wait a minute, have I advocated for myself in this moment, or am I just putting all of the pressure on them? I've had people come to me really like way beyond a time, like disappointment. And I have always felt like, oh, I missed that they were contributing this particular thing. And it's not because I meant to, but just because, we're busy.
Yeah. Well, and it's surprising to even hear you say that, because for me, I'm always like, it's 100% my job to advocate for myself. It's no one else's job. If I get a sponsor, that's an accessory. But like, I've never thought of it as being anyone else's job but mine to get me what I want.
Yeah, it's just like your mother. You hear your mother's voice, right? So strong.
There he
But I
is.
do think that that's an important voice to recognize. And those of you who are out there and you're thinking, oh gosh, this is so far from me, or I don't have that kind of confidence, I think that that's an important thing that that you just said to yourself, because that's an example of something you say to yourself. Whose job is it besides mine? I've got to do this, you know?
I mean, and that's a moment I was when I, you know that I never wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. We had a few folks at leadership that were like, I want to do a few years as a stay-at-home mom. And I was like, 1-800, not it. And then for myriad reasons, I was a stay-at-home mom for 18 months. After a year and almost a year and a half, I was carrying my older son down the stairs. He's like 18 months, not even 18 months old. And I started crying and I just collapsed on the stairs and I was depressed and I was like, who's going to save me? I need something. And the first voice in my head was, you save yourself. That's what you do, is you save yourself. And I immediately started exercising, meditating every day. And within 3 months, I beat 8,000 other applicants for the job that got me into this company. So it was one of those moments where it's like, and even when I kind of fall down, it's always on us. Like it's Mary Oliver, the only journey we can save is our own, right? And that's just true.
And it's powerful to, as a reminder to, no matter what it is, to constantly bring ourselves back to that moment, because it is our lives, right? We have one life, and probably, I think we do, um, you know,
Like
and
it.
we do, it is up to us. I do think that's important, no matter what phase of your career you're in, no matter what relationship you're in, no matter what it is, maybe your thing to be at that you need to advocate for is within your own family. Maybe it's with somebody you want to date. Who knows
That's right.
what it is? All right. So tell us what are some tips, kind of practical tips or things that people can do to get a little bit better at self-advocacy? Do you have one?
I have some they're practical, but they're also very silly because I think that a big thing about self advocacy is almost like stage fright. Like it feels scarier than it actually can be. And so I have like silly phrases that I share. I share this with all the young people that I mentor and all the like older people that are like, what do you do? And I'm like this. And they're like, you're a nut. And I'm like, correct. And it still works. One is just like a very silly thing that I did with Ada. You remember Ada, my dog, my puppy. I have a
Yes.
very small
Of
dog
course.
that Christine taught to eat tissues when she was a little puppy and had broken toes and had to come into work with me for a month and a half. Ada was going down these stairs at one point and she was afraid of them because they didn't have like the underneath. And I was like, bravey gravy, Ada, bravey gravy. And it doesn't make any sense, but just that nonsense word helps me be brave, or saying helps me be brave, because it's just not that deep. Like life is so deep, but it's also just not at all. And so what is bravery if not just being like, might as well go for it. And so Bravey Gravy is one. Phil hates this one of mine. My husband, Phil, hates this one of mine, which is might as well. Because I'm like, we adopted a puppy from a hoarder 6 weeks, excuse me, after I had my second child. And he's like, why do you think that's a good idea? I'm like, we might as well. And he's like, that's not an argument. I'm like, yeah, no, might as well. And like, just like, might as well try it. Might as well do it. Might as well, might as well, might as well. And so that's one that I use as a hack, as well as
I
Will.
heard somebody, just to interrupt you for a second. I heard somebody that you know well said that their best friend uses now all the time YOLO. You only live once. YOLO, YOLO,
Yoga.
and
I
that's
think
how she gets herself into it.
it's fat and it's very real. And like now, my mom recently went through like a health thing, and now we're saying YOLO all the time because it's
It's
like
the truth.
it's just true. And if you want to do it, you want to go to a fancy tea, we're going to a fancy tea, because YOLO for real. Another one that I do that's a hack is that email that you're afraid to send. You live in a world where you're in your pretending. Remember when we were kids and we used to pretend? We still have that skill set. I like to remind adults about that all the time. We all kept growing up. We're still kids that kept growing up. We can still pretend. We know how. It's in our bones. Like pretend you're not going to send the email, but make it perfect. Make it the perfect email that you're not going to send. And then make it the perfect subject line that you're not going to send, because you're not going to send it. You're not going to send it. Make it perfect though. And like, you wouldn't be ashamed. You've checked it 3 times. You can sit overnight with it. And then put the people in the two that you would send it to, because you're not going to send it. You're not going to send it. You're not going to send it. And then just send it and walk away from your desk.
Yeah.
That's a hack of mine that is very effective, because especially when it's the things that I'm most intimidated to do, of just like, I'm not doing this. 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 Oops, I did it.
Yeah. Because then once you spend all that time, you're like, well, I might as well send it now.
It's perfect. Nothing wrong with it. What are they going to do? It's all done. Send.
Yeah. Yeah. You're playing mind games with your own mind.
Correct.
I love it. What's another one?
I guess in a self advocacy standpoint, In sales, so I called my cousin that's been successful in sales, and I was like, okay, I have MS though. So like bandwidth wise, what does this mean from a how many hours I'm working perspective? And he very glibly and correctly said, well, you're always working, but you're never working. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, you're just always working and you're never working. And that's true. Like Christine, you know that, I'm sure. It's just you're just always on, but you're yourself, right? You're yourself. You're in your own zone. You're not pretending to be anything you're not. You're just there for your people when they need you. I've had to be very clear about my boundaries with that. So I'll often start working early in the morning, but from bed on emails from my phone. I'm often stopped working at 4 or 5. 5 is usually when I'm working with like a mentee. I'll take like a later in the afternoon, evening a meeting, excuse me. And just having that very black and white, when it's 5, you're done. And sometimes when it's 4, you're done, but you're like still obviously responsive. And I'm not like totally checked out and I've forgotten about work, but just I'm walking away from my desk. I'm working from home. That's obviously challenging because I'm in the kitchen and I can see my desk from
Babies.
there. But
Yeah.
yeah, I want to get to my kids, and like there that's important too. And if I don't fill that up, then I'm not going to be able to get the best out of me. And like that was a conversation that I had with my director early on, is that I know that sales leaders are like, you got to work, you have to like deliver, you have to deliver, you have to deliver. And what I had to say to him was like, I have to tell you, sir, I've always been an overachiever. I've always gotten straight A's and also been in all the extracurriculars. And like, that's always been me. So I need you to trust that I'm just going to do my job and overperform, which, my average since I've been in sales is 118%. So I've always way overperformed the expectation, having no background in sales. And I'm like, and you just need to be in the background and like clap and believe like Tinkerbell, because that's like really what you need to do. And then if I raise my hand and need help, I'm going to tell you I need help. But in general, that's all I need. And he pivoted to that. And not only did he pivot to that, this is a leadership lesson. He called me. He's one of the best leaders I've ever known, and thanked me on his way to Thanksgiving that way for making him grow into a different sales leader and a stronger sales leader, because I asked for something that he'd never been asked for before.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Good for him too, to have the vulnerability to share that. I think those are some really important tips. I also think it's very interesting that you even advocated for your boundaries, and I think that's really interesting. And you backed it up with what I think is really key is you aligned your advocacy to the bigger picture. So you were saying your fear might be that I'm not going to perform, or that, because that could realistically, that could be his examples in the past. But because you can say, look, I'm at 118%, because I guarantee you, if you ever slipped below 100%, you'd have a different kind of
I have a
conversation with
moment.
you.
And like,
Yeah.
Christine, you know me. If I'm under 100%, I'm having a moment, because
Yeah.
I'm not living up to my own expectations. My expectations, my goal every year is to be at 143, because it stands for I love you. And I just feel like that's good juju in the universe. And I hit it. I hit it on the nose not this past fiscal, but the year before.
Wait a minute. Number 143
Yeah.
mean, in what world does that mean I love you?
In so many worlds. I is one
Teach
word.
me, girl.
So I is one word, love is 4, and you is 3. Oh, yeah. If you had a pager in the 90s, 143 is a quick I love you. Mr. Rogers, that was how he always knew that he was in the right direction, because after he would swim every day, he'd get on the scale and he always weighed 143 pounds, which just makes me happy, because it's not a lie, because Mr. Rogers said it. So it's true, darn it.
Oh, that's so great. I
Just
had
putting out
never
love
heard
in
that
the
before.
universe.
I love it. That's a great one. The other one that I think is really important for people that I see is to speak up early, not when it's too late. And I see a lot of times people will, let's just talk about increases in salary or something. What I notice is that people come to it often after the decisions have already been made. And so let's say in a lot of companies that we help coach the folks or whatever, they know end of year bonus and increases are coming, and everyone's getting nervous. Everyone's getting nervous about it, nervous about it. And so you're thinking, and then by the time the folks want to say something, all the decisions have been made already. They've been made so much earlier than you think. And so if you go in now and advocate, then they almost do not have the power to change it. Most people don't. And so they'll oftentimes then be thinking of it for next time, which is important. I had a really good lesson. I think you'll appreciate this as a former athlete yourself. I don't know. But my kids play soccer and always did, and I was always amazed when we would be on the sidelines and people would be yelling at the refs. Right, it used to drive me crazy. And then I said to my husband at one point, who's English, right? So he grew up with soccer and football and so forth. And I said, why do people yell at the refs about this? The call has been made. Like, it's done. You can't change it. And Philip goes, we're not arguing for this call. We're arguing for the next call. And I was like, oh, okay. And I thought to myself, that is a lesson because if the crowd is influencing the referee on what their next move is, that may be more important call than the call that you're fighting with them on now.
That's right.
And I thought, oh, that's a very interesting metaphor for work.
Well, I mean, I expect it's best to early advocate early and often, right? Like I walked in, I was not even a month into the job, and I was like, this is where I want to grow. I want to first be excellent at my job as it is now. I'm not blowing off this job. I need to be great here. And then I want to grow to that next space. It definitely took my manager by surprise, but he was appreciative of it because it really showed that I had intentionality, that I had thought about it, that I wasn't being kind of willy-nilly about it all, but that I had a deliberate plan. Career maps that you and Miss Erica walked us through ages ago and yesterday helped me with that because it's just always thinking about what the next thing is and making sure that people know that's what you want your next thing to be, because you'll suddenly have a tribe around you. I mean, even, I don't know if, I mean, I expect you might remember this, but after I was diagnosed with MS, I had been out of leadership for like a year and a half. And my first impulse was to just email all the leadership people that I love dearly and just being like, hey, FYI, I love you. And this is a true thing that has happened to me. And now you know. And like, I think sharing information about ourselves and being vulnerable about what's hard, but also being vulnerable about what you want is something that we deserve. We owe it to each other. And if we lead and we do it, that empowers everybody around us to do the same.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that too. That was a nice email to get, even though it was sad. It was nice to hear that, right? I think there's also some reality of this, and just to not to be a bummer, but to just to voice it, is that I think sometimes I can remember myself, and I'm not proud of it, but sometimes you would come in advocating for something, I don't know, whatever, the next thing you wanted or the next piece. And I would, my gut would say sometimes that you were right. And sometimes, oh, she's not ready. And there's other reasons for this and stuff. But I do remember moments when we were able to give you something that you wanted, right? So we were able to give you a raise, or we were able to give you a new job title, or we were able to give you a new job responsibility more than anything, usually with you. I remember having a sense of relief of like, well, thank goodness. Now Ali can calm down for a little bit because it was a lot sometimes, to feel like you're disappointing somebody or that you're not able to let them grow as fast as they want. There is a moment of like, oh, okay, can we just like, is she good? Like, is she good?
Relax. My dad used to say relax to me a lot, and that probably missing that voice. And it's true. There's a little bit of like fatigue for you. And like you say, calm down, Ali. I'm like, I've never been calm. I remember talking about in workshops about the thoughts we have in the shower because we're not thinking about everything. And I'm like, wait, you guys don't think in the shower? I'm also thinking in the shower. Like the ADD thing, how did I miss that for so long, right? Like it's just like attention to all the things at all the times. It's like a can't stop, won't stop sort of thing.
Right. And if you have a person if you're lucky enough to have a person like Ali working for you, they require more of us. They require more of us as leaders. They require you to give them honest feedback so that they can grow. It doesn't mean that we only gave you what you want. We probably gave you more times stuff you didn't want, which was important for your growth, which was feedback or like, hold your horses there, Missy, or something that you've got to learn, or you're not ready, or you missed, this is where you're missing something, or, learn this. And we'd send you back and you'd ultimately learn more, read more, do more. And I think if you're performing and you've got somebody who's performing, do not squash their light.
Yeah.
Like look for opportunities to call yourself to the table to say, I need to give them feedback. And what they're advocating for is more feedback more often. It doesn't all have to be good. It doesn't all have to be money. It doesn't all have to be a new title, but it does need to be feedback. And if you're better at that, then the people will hopefully perform or they will go somewhere else. And ultimately that's what you need, is somebody that's performing and then figuring out, we say we want initiative all the time. Self-advocacy is a version of initiative.
That's right. And I think the floundering moments, I think, were a gift too, because not merely did it give me a chance to be like, okay, I'm not ready for this yet, like a humility moment, right? You saw the attitude I had still, right? Still lacking attitude there. But it also ingrained in me such a lifelong learner growth mindset MO, right? Where that's all I do is I'm constant. If I'm not better than I was yesterday, I'm doing something wrong. If I'm not growing, then I'm dead. So it also simultaneously put something in me, the individual, to make sure that I was always getting better, because if I wasn't ready, well, then I better be getting better. So I'm ready, as a person that was very hungry for the next thing.
Yeah. And these folks, they're great to have a mentor, to give them a mentor, for them to then mentor, all of that, because they need that feedback loop so strongly. You don't have to be the only one. Like, there's a lot of people that can be a part of their process. And Yali, you definitely taught me that. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing
Thank
with
you so
us
much for
some
having
of your
me.
story and some tips for folks that are out there, because you are really great at it. And I'm glad that you're seeing so much success where you are, even in the midst of a lot of struggle. So thank you.
I so appreciate y'all. And again, I say we about UKG, but I still say we about leadership, because once a leadershipper, always a leadershipper, as far as I'm
That's
concerned.
right. That's right. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for spending time here on Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you want to get anything more out of this, go to our YouTube channel and please subscribe to Leadership Lab TV. If you heard something today, of course, that resonated with you, do something with it. It's all about the choices that you make. It's what you say in conversations, how you show up in a moment. Share this episode with someone who's maybe starting a new job or stepping into a new level of leadership, and try one idea, because it just might create some pretty powerful leadership ripple effects. Until next time, keep stepping in, because the room changes when you do.